Hi, so Chris Bensted here with Tommy Sandhu, and the DIA. Too many letters in this for a dyslexic in this industry. So the DIA had the motor mouth session last night that Tommy was on, and we'd been speaking previously and said, let's have a chat. Let's have a chat turned into let's go on Zoom and hit record because you don't know what we're going to say. And then the first 2 minutes of us just saying hello to each other has been worth us hitting record and saying, right, let's put it out there. So we are inviting you into listening into our conversation, and then giving you the opportunity to comment on it. We'll put it on the socials. We'll see what's happening and everything else. I'm now going to pretend that all of you guys watching aren't there, and Tommy and I can have the conversation we were going to have. Hopefully a nice, open and honest one. But we were just saying, or I was just saying, I'm always worried about offending people. It's that thing of the second something feels political, if you're aware enough to know about the problems, the potential problems. As we said, we don't know if there are any. But if you're aware enough to know about it, you're aware enough to know you might upset people, which I don't mind doing when it's right. But I don't want to do it accidentally. I have plenty of times. So, do you want to give us the background? Because you kind of raised the flag on this one. Was it following the DVSA meetings?
Yeah, so I think it's been brewing for a while, and I don't think what we do is we kind of have a room full of people and say we're going to improve something or do something, and that's been going on for years. I've been in the industry 22 years now, so it's nothing new. The question here is we're now trying to improve a system that I'm probably involved in more so than I was a century ago, a decade ago, for example. So the question here is how do we make sure that the quality of the service that we as driving instructors provide and trainers provide more so is fit for purpose.
Mhm.
We already know the waiting times are totally extended and everything else, but now we're starting to improve something. We've got to have that conversation, and this is not about divisive processes. It's about what's right for people. We're
Mhm.
both on social groups. We both see loads and loads of posts from so many different people of so many different backgrounds with so many diverse issues that say, I can't get through part one, I can't get through part two, and I can't get through part three. Are we doing them a disservice?
There's a lovely kind of example of minority, isn't there? In this industry, driving instructors are the minority in a way that we don't have power and control in a lot of ways. We get to do what we want inside of our own world, but actually, we're then it's the people outside of us. I don't want to say above us. I think that's what I'm hesitating for. The people outside of us that make all of those choices and everything else, and we need to be represented. And I know that's the drum that I've been banging. Um, you Through this is why the DITC started,
Mm.
uh, which was the beginning of lockdown. I'd been to Tesco's. You may have heard this story because I've said it so many times, but I'd been to Tesco's and they'd shut the doors early because they didn't know what was happening. The world was shutting down. I then went home and I saw the front door with the family behind it, and I looked at my car with my headboard on the top, and I basically went, "Oh shit!" It was a really pure emotional response, and I just went, this is not a good thing. And then I thought about all of the other instructors and the fact that no one was saying it's going to be okay. No one was saying we are a voice for everybody, and we'll make sure you're in touch and connected. We know how disconnected the industry is. And that was when I did what everybody does in the modern age of record a video and stick it on socials. And that's kind of where DITC was born, of not an association, being a signposting platform because people needed stuff and they needed to know where to find it, but equally being a voice to hold people to account and to raise things, which is absolutely what you're doing here. So yeah, I think it's really kind of akin with that, and it's about making sure that we've got a voice that's being heard, potentially multiple voices, and B, we we make sure everyone else is being held to account, because, to use the example that we were talking about with the DVSA meetings, that I was sat there, I was very aware, as I always have been in those meetings, of something that I'm going right back to when John Lepine was in the meetings with us, who's now retired. He would always point out that it was a load of, white faces in the room making decisions for the whole industry, for all of the learners from different backgrounds and cultures and everything else. And that was always very important to him, which I know he wouldn't mind me saying. You wouldn't necessarily have thought that to look at him or meet him initially. It wouldn't be your initial response, because that's not how we're programmed. So, but I've kept that as being really important to me. And I know Peter Harvey, is in those rooms, and it's important to him. Carly's raising things through DIA, and well, Stuart, he's Scottish. There's a minority for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the
You know,
money.
it's he was talking about the other day about the Scottish cringe when people talk about kilts and haggis and things, and it's um it is so diverse as an industry, backgrounds, experience in work. I've been sat in the test centre with doctors and lawyers who are now driving instructors, and it fascinates me. So the big question that's come through from the conversation last night and from social media: does it matter?
Okay, so I think you hit the nail really well on the head by you sitting there saying in COVID, you went home and you turned around and looked at your car. How many PDIs must do that right now every day? Just failed their third attempt. Yeah. Now, some of them, we know we're going to get a fail rate. We understand that. But when it's less than 30% pass rate, that's can't be right. That's got to be something that's not quite delivering correctly. Now, again, this is why the raise of voice comes, because what we've got to understand is, are we just putting people through for the sake of doing that? Because it's a money-making machine. And
So, sorry. So what you're saying is, are we filtering out the people that are just never going to make it, instead of just taking their money?
yeah,
And
do we do that? Do we do that? No.
are we being realistic with people, and being honest with them about that part of the process? That's where you're coming.
Yeah, and if you look at, and I've worked in many industries all my life, and obviously I'm British born, educated, and everything else. So to me, I am, I know I can go through the system. But if you've got somebody that's, a refugee, for example, and I'm not targeting anyone, but that person thinks that they can go through a process, earn a decent salary, and they've been sold a fantastic storyline. Is that correct or wrong? Right or wrong? I don't know the answer to that. Is there a gatekeeper that says, actually, what we need to do first is do a competency test? May that be an English test, may that be maths test, whatever it might be, that says this is the starting point. If you can't get past that, we cannot continue.
Because the job's a little bit like being a barber, isn't it? It is that it's a set of skills you can transfer from any country. The difference with being a barber is, arguably, you don't need to be able to speak the language to cut people's hair.
It depends, because again, if you went to a barber's and you've got to cut your hair and you're there for a while, because you, like me, maybe have your beard done, your hair done, and it could be an hour, and the guy can't translate with you, how do you feel?
Yes, yeah, it's definitely a beneficial skill. I
Yeah.
think we're that next level up, where we don't teach driving, we teach people. So and actually, there's I've spoken to people where they've got an amazing niche inside of their own community, because they can teach in a language that others don't speak, or whatever it might be. It can be an asset. But you're right, if you can't get through that qualification process, if you can't get to that point, then someone's just either taking your money or allowing you to find out that you're not capable, and it's whose right is it to make that choice?
Yeah, and that's probably the bigger thing at the first start point is that hurdle. And and I'm sure you do because you do the you do the theory compliance and everything that kind, and we do it. And I must, I'm on TikTok now. We've got 3,500 followers, and most of my queries are I can't get my theory done. I can't.
Yes.
And when you speak to them, you can clearly understand they're never going to be able to either. They can't comprehend the English language. So we need a gatekeeper that says this. And the interesting thing is to become a taxi driver, most counties or cities will say you've got to do a competency test of some sort.
Hmm. Yes, that authority level of they've got to have a responsibility, and they
Yeah,
need to tick that box. They don't
yeah,
have to be able to drive, but they have to be able to speak English in
yeah,
some areas, because they
yeah,
don't even necessarily have a driving test.
yeah.
They have a some other kind of competency test.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think that's the first thing about equality, I suppose, that we give everyone a level pitch. So when
Yeah.
people think we're all equal, we're not talking about we're equal as driving instructors. It's if you've got two people standing at a fence, one's 4 foot high and one's 5 foot, you're straight away disadvantaged. That's not in equalness. The equalness would be we give them a something a foot big that makes them both 5 foot high so they can reach the bench together.
Yes.
And if they can't do that, then that's fair because you just know that they're not going to get through the process, for example.
It was there was a primary school teacher who was trying to cover equality
Mm,
with the kids in the class, and they said, if little Johnny is not good at maths, equality is giving him what he needs to help him be good. If you're good at maths, I might not help you as much.
mm,
That's not wrong. It's not equal amounts of time. It's not equal amounts of help. It's help to balance things out where it's needed. Um, and then you instantly feel that it's not equal, don't you? When you say that, you suddenly go, well, hang on, but is that fair on
oh,
and everyone gets heated, and then we have these conversations, and
yeah.
basically
And
thumbs
the
up.
other thing is you've got to understand, even from my point of view, I'm well educated. I come from this country. I can write and read quite cleverly, but I have parents that are first generation Asian. My mom's
Mhm.
illiterate.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I've got a lived in experience, even though I can't do it for her. I clearly see the difficulty she has on a daily basis
Yeah.
of the simplest stuff. And I know we're not talking about driver's license at that level, but if you've got people that are coming in that are even slightly just higher than them, and
Mm.
somebody says, you'll be all right, just pay your money and you'll get through it, and 13 times later they don't, how disheartening and vulnerable are they?
Yeah.
How do we allow
And
that to happen?
but you're right, and it's not just down to language. It's also down, or sorry, it's not just down to ethnicity or other languages. English as a second language. I work with
Same.
more so on the learner side of things. I work with so many people who cannot read and write, and they're trying to get through the theory. Part one, it puts them off, so I don't end up working with them as much because they struggle, and they try. And the fact that we've moved away from learning by rote and having the revision questions being the test questions, and they're now different,
Yeah,
expect them to get more different. All right,
yeah,
watch this space.
yeah,
There's that system is already in the process of changing things. The most recent questions on the learner theory are the language is challenging. I was working my way through, going, hang on a second, how do I explain this?
mm,
And the more technical words we use, the less they're allowed to adapt
mm,
that language to through language modifiers and things. So yeah, I think, as you rightly pointed out before I hit record, this has been picked up because it was the obvious way to address it as a potentially an ethnicity challenge with the DVSA, which I think is an important one. But it's not just that. It's about the broader equality of the industry and what we do, which
yeah.
I don't think, possibly because of what people expect. I don't think that's what people necessarily read on Facebook and kind of ran with.
And that's a classic example of we are all different.
Yeah.
We are totally different. We read differently, we write differently, we digest differently, we think differently. So when we put that post out, the reason I wanted it to be left on, because it just showed how different people think.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we contained that down into a funnel, we would have got what we wanted, the correct answer. By just posting it the way it was posted, maybe the way I thought, you picked it up in a different way. So, and this is exactly what we're trying to teach, because we're coaches and client-centered and everything else, then we've got to be able to do that. We've got to be able to put something out, and people should be able to kind of digest it in a way that makes it a safe place to learn and educate. But if people are all sitting there reading it differently, well, that's telling us that we've got it wrong.
So you've said a couple of times you don't know. What do you think? So you said you don't know what we should do. Don't if we even if we should be having this conversation. We should
Yeah.
absolutely have the conversation.
Yeah.
But what what do you think we should to what level should we adapt things and put things in place?
Well, we have to think about the whole industry. We've been in the industry. I've been 22, and I'm sure you've been in there just as long. And when you
16.
look at 18, okay, so we're promoting road safety. We are the lead edge of like the road safety, and DVSA is a gatekeeper of that kind of thing. And we've got to keep people safe. And if we can't get that process right, we're putting the wrong peoples on the road as well. And we've got to have that frank conversation. We can't hide from that either, because we know there's lots of PDIs out there that are in that job for the wrong reasons. They're in that to make money, fast money, and there's things going wrong. The complaints are coming through faster than ever. We also know in this week's news what's going on with, the Rotherham cases and all that.
Mm.
We have more taxi drivers in our industry now than we had probably 10, 15 years ago. Does that mean we're going to have that challenging problem because we're putting PDIs, ADIs without gatekeepers into a car with young, vulnerable adults? I
That
don't
is
know the answer to that question, but I know most people will not ask that question because they're too frightened.
I think it's really interesting because it links in with all of the big ticket issues at the moment, doesn't it? Of safeguarding,
Yes.
the whether you can do the job, as in whether you can make money, because we've suddenly seen that potentially there's a little bit of a dip in demand because of the backlog and challenges and everything else. Some of it's just normal, but it's highlighted because of exams and things. If they know they're not going to get a test, they're not in such a hurry. And across the whole of the UK, there's been the people saying suddenly went a bit tight. I had it on the theory side; it all really went quiet, and it's picking up again now. So it's important that we have viable options. I think the other one that is highlighted to me is that when trainers like ourselves are taking on board potential PDIs, we're still quoting in the majority of people's cases, we're quoting you can have 3 attempts at part 2 and you can have 3 attempts at part 3. Can you get 3 attempts into a part 1 certificate now? Yeah, we in some cases we're struggling to get 1 attempt.
Mm.
So, are we promising things that we can't deliver? That aren't in our control, but at least we can be honest about that bit of the process.
And that's what I think it needs, is that honesty conversation, because I'm sure you get plenty of calls from the big branded companies that trainers that come to you and said, I've been tied into a 3-year contract or X or Y. Um, I'm not here to defend or anything else with anyone. But the question is, people do not read T's and C's. I
Yeah.
don't. I sign stuff away for X amount of money, and it's excruciating, and you think, do I really read that? And I'm telling somebody else you should be reading that contract. But then when the pain comes, like you're saying, when they've got to pay their costs and they're not making the money back, we're actually going back 10 years. We're going back 15 years when these things started to happen. It happened in COVID when people couldn't afford it. Have we learned nothing?
Yeah.
Have we not going to make these changes? Are we never going to are we just going to call it another tick box exercise? And these are the kind of things that, wrap up the whole diverse thing, the inclusion. And are we inclusive? Do we really look after that? The training, the ADIs, the PDIs, or is it every man for himself?
So if we go with representation in the room to start with, let's have a work through the different kind of sections that we've touched on. So what a lot of people thought it was about, including myself to some extent, and I accept it's because I was sat there and I was thinking it.
Mm.
So we often see what we want to see. Does it matter who's in the room as long as the good decisions are being made, or can we not make those best decisions if we don't have representation in the room?
So I think we have to have some kind of representation, whether it's in the room, out the room, at the side of the room, because the lived experience you have and I have are totally different. That's the starting point. So if you
Mhm.
come back and say, "Oh, we've done something on behalf of somebody," you can't have that lived in experience. So we have to have that challenging aspect, and somebody that struggles with something, or if a group or minority or whatever says, "Look, this is where we feel it needs to change," then we've got to have that representation. And if we
Okay.
don't have that representation, we can't really challenge anything because, like you said, you've read that post in a particular way. So you're now going to go in with that narrative.
Mm?
Is that
Yes.
the correct narrative or the wrong narrative? Yeah, more than likely, from my point of view, that would be a total wrong narrative. And I'll be saying, why did you go with that narrative?
Yeah.
Because you read it that way. And that's not you being wrong. Absolutely not. But it just means you haven't got that representation. And this
Yeah.
is where the problem comes. The big boys, they want to kind of think we want more money through the doorway. We want more PDI through the doorway because that's their business model. So if we turn the tap off, for example, if that was the right thing to do, they would not want that. As individuals in the organization that train regularly from the kind of downwards, or we want quality service and everything else. And that's where we're at, if that makes sense. And if we don't have that whole representation in that room, it doesn't work.
That's very similar to other areas of business where you get one end of the high street which is about quantity and one end of the high street that's about quality.
Mm.
If you say to those quantity individuals, well, it's not about quality, is it? They tend to get very upset.
Mm.
So, they try to deliver quality inside of that niche that they're getting there, but there's restrictions, and then there's economies of scale as well, and things like that. So that reflects elsewhere.
Mm.
I I think that I'll talk about me. Right. So, because this is something that we've had previously, the DITC have done a lot of work regarding the LGBTQ plus community, and trying to help get awareness out there because DITC is Ian, Brett, and myself. We're
Mm.
two. I'm going to say middle class white blokes because it upsets Ian when I call him call him,
Yeah.
no, anything specifically with a label. And then I'm going to throw onto it that he is now middle aged as well. So I can now say that we are both two white middle class,
Yeah.
middle aged white, blokes,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
allegedly straight.
Yeah.
No one's asked.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Fair
they've assumed every step of the way. So we fit that box, which sometimes we feel we almost have to apologise for. And I've had this conversation with Graham Hooper previously that you sort of end up feeling like you can't have the opinion, and the reason that we did that work, really important to us, was people are banging on a door that sometimes someone's got to open it
Mm.
and help that happen. We've done similar with addressing perimenopause, not a conversation the two of us will sit here and have because again, we're not living it. So we are living the other side of it, and I think educating men about it is really important, which is why we got involved.
Mm.
But I had driving instructors phoning up. Why you picked me to phone up, I don't know, but I love the fact that you did. I had driving instructors phoning up saying, "This is happening to me. Is it going to affect me in my job, me in the role?" So I did homework, but I can't live it. That makes so much sense.
Mm.
We then got the issue that, as ourselves, we don't want to offend anyone, but we want to be supportive, and then we end up butting heads with people, and we haven't got the defense because it's not our defense to have, and it gets so difficult to then take that next step of, are you pushing tokenism, which we're not asking for, but actually are we engaging in that way, and something we put out, it sounds wrong to say it was the next step along from the LGBTQ plus, but on our list of things to do, things that we'd addressed in the industry, we were aware at a lot of the conferences and things. Again, it was very, very representative of kind of the white side of the industry. We raised and got shouted at. What was awesome, there was a notable change. Now, whether that's reflective of just the way the industry might have shifted, as you said, with people from certain areas like taxi drivers coming into things and what have you, you know, you don't notice the change unless you have those conversations as well. So I think to whoever decides to watch, we would like to know what things we can do, to put things in place, if it's necessary, or is it down to the individual, the person watching, to make sure that they are being a voice and having a voice through the channels? Are the channels in place? Do we need to be asking for them, or do they just need to engage with them more? Because I think sometimes it's very easy to moan about stuff. Massive respect to you for raising it.
I think the problem here is, firstly, like you just highlighted, that it is two middle-aged white men, which is fine. Who do you represent? Who are your community of people, for example? And I don't know the answer to that. What I remember this.
We don't know, because we have names, as was quite nicely raised by Kenny on the Motormouth, which, if anyone hasn't seen the Motormouth, DIA will be putting it on their YouTube and such, so check it out. We'll make sure the link gets shared. So Kenny raised the fact that he's a black guy and he's got a fairly white sounding name, so people were surprised sometimes when he turns up. And I always find weird, but again, as you said, don't live it. I think, we could look down our list and try and guess what we're actually doing. We sat down this morning and emailed the internet guy. We're changing things, so we do know.
And that might be a starting point, because it's only when we know the demographics of where our people come from, and where they don't come from more so, that we can start to raise that bar and start going, actually, why do we not get these people in? Is it that they don't feel inclusive? Or is it that we're not doing something correct?
The flip side to it was, why should we care? And not that we don't care, but are we making something important that... Well, I always say we're all green-blooded, because once you become a driving instructor, there's this thing, isn't there? It infects your soul. There are outliers that it's just a job and they just come and do it and they go home again. But generally speaking, it takes over in a way, and it changes the way you think and the way you perceive things. And I think it's reflective of a lot of things where you go, I want to be... I think the most common phrase is colorblind. I don't want to see people's color.
And I get that, but the problem...
Then you realise that's wrong in itself.
But you got to remember, if you're all middle-aged white men in a room, how do you make it inclusive for somebody like me to roll into that room and feel wanted and feel part of that? Because remember, naturally we're kin to our own, if that makes sense. It's just human behavior. Oh, you look like me, you feel like me, right, come in the room. And this is where we get segregation. Unwantedly segregated, because people start going, well, I'm not probably wanted there, so I'll go somewhere else. And then that can cause a problem. It shouldn't cause a problem, because what we should be doing is tapping on people's doors, just like we do as ADIs and PDIs, saying, oh, why don't you become a driving instructor? You'd be great at the job because you've got X, Y, Z. So maybe we have to take some ownership. And I equal in that we should be sitting saying people, why are you not part of DIT? Why are you not part of DIA? Why are you not? And if you are part of the DIA, how come we've never heard of you? Or what is it you do that you could bring to the party? So it's a two-way pronged attack. And you're right, not everybody wants to put their head above the parapet, but
Yeah,
there's going to be plenty out there that would probably give information at least, um, be part of something, be supportive of it, but it has to work two ways. Otherwise, we are creating segregation because what we're doing kind of naturally is we're saying, well, I fit in that group and
yeah,
you fit in that group, and then they don't understand each other. So inclusivity becomes an issue.
yeah. So it's not necessarily about making sure anybody specifically is there, but there's the opportunity for them to be there should they want it.
Mm.
So and you've done all right for yourself, it seems. You've got what, you got 70 now?
Yeah, so we've got 75 instructors, and it's quite
Yeah.
interesting again, that 80% of ours come from a BAME background.
Right.
But
Yes.
we've got a driving school in Rugby, which is up the road, and it's predominantly 90% white.
Right.
And again, that's the kind of things. And, I've pushed the boundaries all the way through my career because I really wanted to progress myself. So I've joined a lot of things and put my head out above the ground. And people like, when people go on Facebook and they get vilified or anything like that, will fall off and they'll say, I don't want to do this. And that will
Yeah.
always happen. That doesn't matter who you are, but we have to keep pressing. We have to, address these subjects, and we have to start saying, but why have we not got that? Why have we not do that? And sooner or later it will change.
So, as someone who's proven their ability to be successful, right? So, none of us, it's the British thing, isn't it? We don't like this bit where we say, "Aren't we awesome?" Right? So, someone who's proven your ability to be successful, you've grown that, you've got you've got an idea and an idea of concept of what you want, and you've achieved it. I'm sure you're not there yet. I know you well enough to know that it's there's more to come. Um, do you think that there's still been areas that you haven't managed to access that you've wanted to inside of the industry, or do you think it is as much as going out and grabbing it? Because as you said, some people don't want to, and
Yeah.
that's irrelevant of any specifics. It just there's people like me who've got a big mouth and an opinion, and as much as I go, I don't want to, I end up talking about it or raising it, especially if I see injustice. It winds me up. So and then you've got other people who we forget about because we assume that the person, not talking about myself, but in the industry, that the one that shouts loudest must be the best.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
amazing, very quiet, getting on with the job instructors out there. Absolutely
Absolutely.
brilliant ones.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, with me personally, I've always worked twice as hard. I've always had that kind of in me, from all the things I've done. If somebody says I need to have one thing, I'll go and have two things. So even when I got my Rosberg Gold, I went and got my Masters, got my level 4. And it just meant that I was kind of, at the level where, somebody really had to say, well, why can't we give him this? Or how can we not give it him? And I have pushed boundaries all the way through my career massively through, to the point where I've worked internationally for TTC, managed for them, and done all sorts of different things. And that's because I've pushed the boundaries. I've really pushed myself out to a level
Why?
that no one else could do. Say again?
Why?
Because I want to prove a point. Me personally, it was me who was wanting to prove a point. I wanted to be that little boy from Coventry that had one school, one driver that people said you can't have a driving school. You're talking bubbles, blah blah blah. To have to say, I'm now recognizing so much of the work I've done in the industry that anyone could do it. It doesn't matter about your race, color, creed, anything. You can do it. You can deliver to that top level. And that was the most important thing for me. But the challenges are hard. They're damn hard. Ken said yesterday on the platform that when he turned up and they realised he was a black man, they didn't really want him there. And that's a classic example of that still to this day.
Mm.
That people go, oh, I didn't realise that that you're of colour or whatever maybe that. that is a gateway. That is the glass ceiling, as we call it.
Yeah.
The DVSA are still predominantly white. So these are the kind of things, even if you go to test centers, now that we are filtering some, there are some great examiners coming through,
Mm.
and everything else, but we haven't still got somebody in the senior management roles. And I'm not saying about the token person, I'm saying there must be people out there that got quite quality that can represent.
So I know that DVSA have always tried to inside of the advertisements and such that they put out for for being an instructor. I would say they've made the efforts. Now it doesn't necessarily mean that they've got the results and that they need to stop trying. But I know they've advertised for examiners with. How can I do that when I'm in the centre of the blooming industry? Anyway, so yeah, examiners. That's the ones. So they've got examiners who've got physical disabilities. They make sure they are represented. They do try to show that diversity of culture through through things, and I think they do recognise that. Again, do you think there's a reason that people from the more diverse backgrounds don't take the job, or is it just it's crap pay?
I think it's education. It's pure and simple education.
Yeah.
If you went to a test center and surveyed them and say, what do you know about an examiner? They'll probably say they work 9 to 5, easy job. Where have we really gone and touched them and said, this is what this is what the role includes, you get sick pay, holiday? I don't know the answer to that again. But, do we really, or do we say we've put an advert out, we've ticked the box and we're done?
Yeah. So because the figures I quickly looked up after Major Match today was the nearest figures I could get was 2014-15, which is a long time ago.
10 years ago, yeah.
But then the only figures I could find out there was suggesting 5% were identified as BAME community, and that's out the ones that chose to identify. So that's not proportionate to the community out there, is there? Especially when you look at certain areas, and it must be. It's nice in anything, isn't it, when you see someone who you can see yourself in doing something that's inspiring, and it's probably not so nice for I haven't been there, but not so nice for the candidates when they go in and there's not anyone who they feel is similar to them in whatever way. Having a soul and being happy potentially with some examiners that I've met, but but just in general, I think all of that must be important.
Of course. I mean, and again, I'll get lots of calls because people know my name and everything else. They, oh wow, you've done so well and everything else, and they're akin to me because they feel they're like me, they look like me, they dress like me, they're of the same color background, everything else. I'm sure you have the same. Somebody will come to you because they look like you, they feel like you, so you're the aspiration for them.
I think firstly, I feel sorry for them if they do look. I think it's very easy to go no, because we are genuinely open to anyone and everything else, but we're in a fairly white dominated area of things that when we move across more towards southeast London, I think there's more diversity over that way, but where we're based, there's not as much. And actually, it has raised the question this morning with Ian and myself about our driving school. Is it something where we should look at, are we advertising in the right areas? Because forget the rest of it for a second. As a business, if we can get more of a customer base, and remembering as a driving school, the instructors are your customer base, that's a good thing. That brings in those opportunity and such. And it then goes right back to what you said at the beginning of, are we then opening up that can of worms of we do turn people away, that people that aren't going to be able to, and we'll have to kind of try and figure that out, because we don't want to be one of those schools that just takes the money and gets bums on seats. You know,
Yeah.
we turn away more people than we take.
Mm.
We try to point them in the right direction and help them out, but it's because that's the driving school that we chose to build was the one that we couldn't find really as two instructors. We built it as a school for instructors, and trying to do that. It's never made us
Yeah.
rich, but
Okay. And
we
how many instructors do you have now?
we are. I'm going to say 14 because I don't like the number 13, but we're around
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah. And
yeah.
it's interesting because, people want growth. Every driving, people who I speak to that say, oh, I want to do what you've done and everything else. And it is that you've got to look at your audience, you've got to look at the quality and everything else. And you've got to build solid foundation. The solid foundation is built on trust, it's built on quality and all these things. So if you know that you're just saying to somebody, I'll take you on because I can take your money, then you're going to go, that reputation does spread.
Yeah.
And when the big brands are being kind of vilified all the time, saying, "Look what's happened," everything else. But then you'll see the smaller niche schools where people are now putting their trust and saying, "I'd rather come with these guys." So you are seeing a bit of a shift in patterns as well, where people are supportive more.
So what do you guys do to try and get the right people in the right places?
I think we're just honest. We will have that frank conversation with somebody and say, let's just have a conversation in English. Now, if you can't converse with me or
Mm.
you can't sit in the car with me and explain something, how are you going to do that when you're on the move at 20 miles an hour or whatever it might be? And do you think it's going to work for you? Maybe come and sit in the back of a lesson. How does that work for you? And if they still feel that it's something for them and they can do a mock theory test that they can get a reasonable mark in, we can say, yeah, we can work with you. But if we get somebody, and we had somebody that rang me from JLR that was on £60,000 a year,
Mm.
told me that somebody's well, a friend's husband's telling her he's earning this much money a year and everything else. It was a frank conversation saying, you've got a degree, let's have an educated conversation. You're in a fast track program, you've got a master's in engineering. Why are you considering this? And she thanked me and she said, you know what, you're the first person that's actually been honest and truthful, because the other three I rang wanted my money straight away.
Mm.
And that's the key difference. And she probably recommended us to others outside of her community, that said, we spoke to them and they told us about you. So, it's about that honesty, I think. It's
Yeah.
being frank.
Yes, and realistic.
Yeah.
I'll throw that in the mix as well. I think it's that sometimes it's not even you can't do it, but I'm not going to be the right person for you.
Mm.
I had a phone call from an instructor last night who we were talking about the fact that sometimes 40 hours isn't enough,
Yeah.
and the majority of providers out there of training, they focus on the test minimum. It's weird, isn't it, that we get introduced to that at the beginning and then it continues to be a problem. And that it's that thing of, well, have you said it's 40 hours and then you get your pink, or have you said you've got to get to a certain level, you've got that standard to get to as well, and been realistic about what's there? Because we do it with learners quite happily. We'll say
Yeah.
you're not there yet, um, but when it comes to the instructor training, it's very often this is what it is because of the market, because of all of those other things, and that's not fair. I've been trying to avoid the F word because I don't like it, because it's so easy to go it's not fair and want it to be fair, but actually the argument needs to be based on other stuff.
Yeah. And
Um,
again, if you think about it, how many people will come to you and say, I just missed it by 2 points?
yes,
The
yeah.
score was 31. I missed it by 2 points. And I'm like going, okay, let me ask you a question. If your learner came to you and said, I've just passed with 14 minors, what would you say? And oh, might be no good. So why do you think getting 31 is
Mm,
is the mark? And that
yeah.
again is that, we have to have that conversation. We got to explain to them that 51 is the mark and you should be working towards 51. And if you pass with a 48 or a 47 or 46, That's acceptable.
Yeah.
Anything beyond that, just like a learner, isn't. But they're so humdrum, like you just said, that that's the minimum standard you've got to reach. That's what everyone accepts. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah. Do you think, because that raises the question of who's in charge.
Yeah.
So is it, so my own drum that I often beat, the minimum standards agency, the DVSA, which is no disrespect in that statement. It's a
Yeah, yeah,
recognition
yeah.
of that's what they do.
Yeah.
Um, they can up the minimum standard, but only we can up the maximum, the expectation and that side of things. Do you think we can solve that, or is it going to be the outliers who are saying, we want things to be utopian? Everyone's going to be. I don't like 51 out of 51. I have an issue with it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I'll avoid the numbers, but everyone's going to be that end of things that it's going to be delivering a really good standard lesson where education is happening and people are staying safe, because that sounds quite kind of nice to me.
Yeah.
If we could achieve that, I think we'd all be happy.
Yeah. And if you
How
think
did
about the
the DVSA
DVS,
do that?
and if you think about the DVSA, they do that with learners. They kind of do that because obviously I know the standard check's gone now, but really they came with this enforcement at one
Mm,
point, even though they've lost that, and that's another subject we'll talk about in a minute.
yeah.
That they kind of said you will get a check test if your learner comes over five minors and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of did that for them. So why is it we're not doing that for the training companies? I know
Yes.
audit's kind of gone, but where is that? Where is that gatekeeping again that says, we've not got somebody that says, I've just passed my ADI badge, now let me train you, that has no standards at all because they just about passed it on the third attempt, with 31, but now feels they can train somebody else. Again, this comes down to equality, all the bits and bobs we talk about.
Well,
Is it right or is it wrong?
good. No one's going to believe we didn't script this, and this is just a conversation, because it would have come out this week, but we've just received the reply to our open letter to Loveday, which will be after this. I'm putting it out there, so it'll be on the website by the end of the day, for people to read, digest, and roll their eyes over. I've read it. The next letter, which we already have written, is about that equality, which is the inequality of audit. Which,
Mm,
I'm an audit trainer. I hate it with a passion. The reason I became audit was because otherwise they wouldn't listen to me, because
yeah.
the DVSA only wanted to talk to audit trainers about improving audit, and that doesn't make sense. Talk to the people that don't like your product if you want to improve your product,
Yeah.
not the ones that are already singing from the same hymn sheet. So that was my reason for getting audit in the first place.
Mm.
It is not fair. You cannot, if there's loads of trainers that have done training, have paid. The money is sat in the DVSA bank account for their audit badge, but they're not getting the test because they're not doing it.
Yeah.
Um, it,
I'm one of them. I think
yeah,
my money's been sitting there probably 6 years now, or maybe longer. I don't even know.
yeah,
And again, this is the equality and inequality we talk about. People think it's just about color or cultures. It's not. If you've got Josh Horan, for example, that's
yes,
banging on the door because he wants to prove a point that he is that standard. You've got other people, Lee Spray, blah, 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 but they can't. Is that an injustice to them? Do we see that? No, because I'm saying, what's the big problem? Yeah, if you ain't got it, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. But I'm not walking in their shoes.
yeah,
I'm
and
an Asian guy with an audit badge here. It's the other way around now. I'm the guy that's got the audit badge, never been tested for 8 years, and I'm Asian. And I'm like, yeah, it's not a problem. Why are you worried about it? Ask them, younger white guys, shall we ask them? And they'll say it's an absolute problem.
yes,
And that's where the change comes then, all of a sudden, that we've got a different, a different group of people, diverse people, that are saying, well, no, it's not acceptable.
it's that privilege thing, isn't it? And
Yeah,
and that goes in. We driving instructors as a general trend, are anti school of mum and dad,
yeah,
because we want to have that and that control, and some of that's for good reason, some of it isn't, but we want that kind of thing there. We then talk about having a minimum number of hours because we want to enforce that.
yeah.
logically, people are going to work to the minimum because we've already said that that works everywhere else. So I've spoken to instructors across the world. One of the privileges of lockdown was I got to reach out, and they didn't have much to do either. So I should have been playing with the kids in the garden. I didn't. I spoke to instructors for 16 hours a day. So a lot of them are saying once you bring in that minimum, they're jealous of what we get to offer of doing 40, 50, 60 hours with someone, because they're going to be working to that point. And it is this really interesting concept, which it's so easy to either sit back on your laurels if you are on the privileged seat at that table, whichever table it is, or to sit and go, that's not fair if you're not. Both of which positions are not wrong, but that doesn't make them right. And I think that's the really interesting thing. So my brain is now kind of I have my own internal polls, because as many people know, I have like 10 voices on the go at once.
Yeah. And if you look at it, if you look at it from my point of view, it's easy for me to walk away from all of this. I've done everything right. I've made my money. I've got
Yeah.
driving school. I've done international work. I've worked for TTC, and literally I've done it all. So I could just say, well, why do I need to worry about it? I'm that privileged guy that's actually made the most amount of money out of the industry. I still go to talks and everything else. But we also have a duty to the people we work with. We also have a duty to serve with the people we work with and listen to them. Because if we are the people that are kind of people are coming up to, then it's important that we give them a voice, because maybe they can't have that voice. So it is important that whoever sits on that table, whether it be you, him, or her, they have to kind of represent a whole sector. And that is very, very, very important. Otherwise, we are never going to get that done.
So the next question comes from a good place. You've said that you like kind of that being able to prove a point, right? Being able to have it and say, look, I've achieved this and this is there. Does that come from you're raising your head above the parapet? Does that come from a position of passion where you want some equality out there, or does it come from, and it can be both, does it come from you wanting to be the one that's doing the shouting? Where does, because that's what people, what Facebook's like. That's
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes from a point of passion. I think when you speak, and I'm sure like you're saying COVID, I was the same. We have to shut our store down. And when we shut our store down, we had all of these guys that were self-employed. Some of them weren't going to get paid and everything else. We had to make some very crucial decisions during that time about what we charge or what we do. And we made the choice of not charging people, even though that cost us money. And this is about passion. This is about, we have a charity and all the rest of it. And this is about road safety. This is about the people that served me and gave me what I've got and giving something back. This is not about me. I don't even want to be on the table. I'm not interested in being on the table. I'm just interested in somebody does go on the table to make sure that it's fair for people, that we don't get these calls that say, I've just spent £1,300 on my part one and I can't get it, and I spent another, and I know I'm going to be out the industry. We just want it to be a quality industry and maintain that quality, rather than it going absolutely pear and then we thinking, oh, what happened there? So yes, to answer your question, it's more about passion here. It's about saying to people, we want to hold people accountable. This industry's gave me everything, and I need to give something back.
It's aside from the actual point, right? Because this is very often where I think the fringes is where the good stuff comes in. The same with trying to change things with the DVSA. What actually happens is there is a culture shift, or there's an awareness that people start moving towards, and it's the little changes that, as we know, are the big things. I think what this has made me realize, partly because of with the DITC side of things, I've really enjoyed this conversation and being able to have this chat, and I think that's something that we're keen to do, is to find more people to have this chat with, because then we can find it. Because actually, right at the end of things, you've touched on the fact that there's lots of stuff about you and what you do and I joked about it earlier that we don't like, praising our own efforts and everything else that people don't know about. Yeah, we don't know. We see the person to wave to.
Yeah.
We see the person. We might chat with them at the test center. I'm always very aware, and again, a big part of the DITC is being aware that there are human beings behind every instructor, behind every job and every company. That we don't know what's going on in people's personal life. We need to be there for that as well as for because it is our identity. It's a massive thing. So yeah, I like to put the invite out to anyone who's been brave enough to listen this far through, because I always wonder whether they do 2 minutes and disappear. So if you're still here, thank you. Reach out to us. We'd love to have that conversation, and have a chat and find out people's backgrounds, where they came from, and that kind of thing. Because I think the more that we know the individuals, it's like any issue where there's a clash, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't tend to you don't object to your next door neighbor. You just object to something about the generalization, the stuff that's in the headlines. So the
Mm.
more that we know our next door neighbors and we know those people that are driving past us, and we recognize them, and celebrate them, why shouldn't we? Even though we're all in competition, it's not the industry we're in. Uh,
Yeah.
I think that
And you're probably only in competition with yourself.
yeah,
When you take that away and you start working as a collective, regardless of who you are, you actually create an industry that's fun. You
yeah,
actually create an industry that everyone respects each other and we learn off each other.
yeah.
And that's the key to all of this, because then we start to grow as an industry. And if we
Yes.
think of each other as competition, if we think of each other as we can't do that. And yesterday somebody came on the podcast and was saying, X and I said to him, I'll give you an open invitation and I'll give all of your listeners an open invitation. They can come and see me at any one time. Come and live in my shoes for a day. I'll live in yours. Let's see what the differences are. Let's understand them. There may be none, but there may be a few.
Is it wrong that I instantly go to food and I'm like, you're going to win hands down on that front?
Why?
I just think, culturally, there's always better food elsewhere. That's the one that I end up with.
Yeah, and that that's just one segment of it. I speak three languages.
Yes,
And it's when you sit with somebody and say, right, we're going to now start translating in a different language. And they go, oh. And I say, well, are you going to follow me now? And they're like, I can't do that. And I say, okay, so there's something that you've learned. But we go into all countries, we do these and it's that kind of understanding. And it's quite eye-opening when
yeah.
people see these kind of things. They actually realize, oh, actually, I would never, I can't do that, and I won't do that, or I can't do that, if that makes sense. But this is what I'm saying is they're open challenges in the sense of in the nicest possible way. But if we work in our communities as a global system, it works much better.
But I just think it's that thing of it's so easy to see different and not the same. Not the similarities, as you say. So
Yeah.
so yeah, go and experience them and have a look. And say I was told a long time ago, I had it pointed out, if you want to figure out someone's driving, look at the language they speak, because it tends to represent, if you look at the country, the
Yeah.
driving of that country is very representative by the way that they speak. Italians are loud and fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I think there's those things, and it is, the things that represent cultures and everything else are the ones where you can find similarity from the difference, and that is always a really interesting
Yeah.
side of things. So I hope you get lots of people wanting to come and sit in the back of the car,
Absolutely.
you
No
know,
problem at all. We're
and,
always open
do
to,
that.
to, to
That'd be good.
information.
But yeah, I thank you.
You're welcome.
I like the opportunities and seeing where they take us, and this one has taken us somewhere really good, I hope. I welcome everyone's feedback. I'm sure they will. So we'll put it out there and see what happens.
Brilliant, Chris. Thank you for having me today. I've
Awesome.
enjoyed it and it's been great fun.